The tray trembled in Maria's hands as she balanced the plates across the crowded dining room of Grandma's Corner Diner. The smell of fried chicken and pot roast mixed with the sweat dripping down her forehead, even with the ceiling fan spinning at full blast. It was almost 11 on a Tuesday night, and her feet were throbbing inside the worn-out sneakers she washed every week to hide the holes in the soles. Table 14. The man in the gray suit who ordered black coffee and looked at her like she was an insect under a magnifying glass. Maria forced a polite smile as she set the cup down in front of him, avoiding eye contact. She had learned that some customers preferred to be invisible, and this one, with his genuine leather briefcase and a watch that probably cost more than 6 months of her salary, definitely belonged to that category. Robert Alden took a sip of the bitter coffee and continued watching. 48 years in the financial market had taught him to read people like he read balance sheets. The waitress was in her early 20s, with rough hands from scrubbing dishes after hours, deep dark circles under her eyes, but an upright posture. Pride disguised as dignity. Interesting. He opened his Italian leather wallet and pretended to look for something, observing out of the corner of his eye. The waitress was wiping down empty tables with mechanical, efficient movements. Tired, but not sloppy. Robert smiled internally. Perfect for the experiment. Maria collected the plates from table 9 while calculating mentally. February 13th. Rent was due on the 15th. She was still $80 short. Her college tuition, 2 months overdue, added up to another $250, and her mother's medication had run out yesterday. She closed her eyes for a second, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion mixed with desperation. When she returned to the kitchen with the stack of dirty dishes, her coworker, Junior, nudged her with his elbow. "That guy at table 14 has been staring at you for a while. I think he's going to tip you, Mari." She rolled her eyes and plunged her hands into the soapy water. A tip, as if $2 or $3 would make a difference in the financial hole she was sinking into a little deeper every day. But every penny counted, so she would thank him politely and stash it in the empty coffee tin she hid under her bed. Half an hour later, the diner began to empty out. Maria was sweeping the floor near the entrance when she realized table 14 was empty. The man in the suit had left without her noticing. She approached to collect the cup and check if he had left anything, and her heart skipped a beat. On the checkered tablecloth, partially covered by a crumpled paper napkin, lay a brown leather wallet. Maria looked around. The dining room was almost deserted. Mr. Antonio, the owner, was closing out the register at the counter. Junior was finishing washing the pots in the kitchen. She picked up the wallet carefully, as if it were a bomb about to explode. It was heavy. Genuine leather, with perfect stitching and that new smell that some things never lose no matter how long they last. Maria opened it. Her fingers trembled. Hundreds. 50s. Some 20s. Gold credit cards with embossed names. A photo of a smiling blonde woman. And a business card. Robert Alden, managing partner. Alden Investments. Maria quickly closed the wallet, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She looked toward the door. How long had the man been gone? 10 minutes? 15? She could still catch him on the street, but her feet wouldn't move. $80 for the rent, $250 for college, the medicine, food for the week, new sneakers, for crying out loud, sneakers that wouldn't soak her feet every time it rained. Maria sat down in the empty chair, still holding the wallet. Her hands were sweating. She opened it again, more carefully this time, and counted. $1,000 in cash, almost 4 times her monthly salary. She could just take what she needed, just the rent. The man probably wouldn't even notice. Rich people don't count money. They have so much that some gets lost along the way and no one misses it. "Maria?" Mr. Antonio's voice made her jump out of the chair. She instinctively hid the wallet behind her back. "Everything okay, kid? You look pale." "I found a customer's wallet, the one at table 14. "Oh, well, go after him then. He must be right out on the street still." Maria nodded but didn't move. Mr. Antonio frowned, studying her for a moment, then returned to the register. She stood there, holding that piece of leather that weighed like lead. "Daughter." Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Paul Miller had been a commercial building doorman for 30 years. He never had much, but he always had enough. And he always said the same thing. Who you are when no one is looking is who you really are. The rest is just an act. Maria closed her eyes. Hot tears streamed down her face without warning. She was so tired, so utterly exhausted from fighting alone against a world that pushed her down every time she tried to climb up. But if she took that money, if she crossed that line, she wouldn't be herself anymore. She would be someone else. Someone her father wouldn't recognize. Someone she wouldn't recognize when she looked in the mirror. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a deep breath, and opened her old cell phone with the cracked screen. The business card had a phone number. She dialed. He answered on the third ring. Hello. The voice was deep, controlled. Maria swallowed hard. Mr. Robert Alden? Yes. You had dinner at Grandma's Corner Diner tonight, table 14. Yes. You forgot your wallet. There was a pause. Maria could hear her own accelerated breathing. I see. Where are you? I'm still at the diner, but I live nearby. I can bring it to you if you give me the address. Another pause, longer this time. Brigadero Faria Lima Avenue, 2954, apartment 1401. Can you come now? Yes, sir, I can. Great. I'll be waiting. He hung up. Maria looked at the wallet in her hands. There was still time to take just a little. Just enough. He would never know. But she would know. And that, Maria realized with painful clarity, made all the difference in the world. 20 minutes later, she was at the door of the most luxurious building she had ever seen. The doorman in his impeccable uniform looked her up and down with poorly disguised suspicion. Maria held the strap of her worn-out purse tightly and lifted her chin. I'm here to return something to Mr. Robert Alden, apartment 1401. The doorman picked up the phone, announced the visit, and indicated the elevator with a mechanical gesture. Maria stepped in, pressed the button, and watched the numbers climb as her heart raced. The doors opened directly into the apartment's private foyer. Robert Alden was there, still in his suit, but without the jacket. He watched her enter with an expression impossible to decipher. Maria took the wallet out of her purse and held it out to him with both hands. It's all here, sir. I didn't touch anything. Robert took the wallet, opened it, and examined the contents with calculated calm. Then he looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. You crossed the city late at night to return this to me. It wasn't a question, but Maria answered anyway. It was the right thing to do. And then she saw it. Something in his eyes. It wasn't gratitude. It was something colder, more analytical, as if he were solving a complex equation and she was an unexpected variable. Maria felt a shiver run up her spine. You tested me, she said softly, the realization hitting her like a weight in her stomach. You left it on purpose. Robert Alden smiled, and there was no warmth in that smile. The silence that settled between them was thick as fog. Robert maintained the smile as he put the wallet into the inner pocket of the jacket hanging on the beige leather sofa. It wasn't exactly a test, he said finally. It was a social experiment, a hypothesis I needed to prove. Maria felt the blood boil in her veins. The exhaustion of the entire night's work, the anxiety of the bus ride there, the fear of doing something wrong, all of it transformed into something different. Anger. Pure, crystalline anger. You play with people's lives as if they were lab specimens? Robert walked over to the built-in bar in the dark wood shelving and poured himself an amber whiskey. He didn't offer her anything. It's not playing. It's observation. I wanted to know if genuinely honest people exist, or if honesty is just a luxury for those who aren't desperately in need of money. You just gave me the answer. And what is the answer? Maria crossed her arms, planting her feet on the cold marble floor. That you are statistically improbable. Robert took a sip and studied her over the rim of the glass. That you are the exception, not the rule. And exceptions, Maria? It was the first time he had used her name. Exceptions are fascinating. I'm not an insect in your collection. No. Robert sat down on the sofa and crossed his legs. You are much more interesting than that. You face what I imagine are significant financial difficulties. Find an amount that would solve your immediate problems, and yet you choose to return it. Why? Because stealing is wrong. The answer came out simple, obvious, and Maria saw something flicker across his face. Incredulity, perhaps. Wrong according to whom? Morality is a social construct, Maria. When you're drowning, you don't stop to think if it's morally correct to grab a piece of wood that technically belongs to someone else. Maria took a step forward, her eyes shining with an emotion she could barely name. I wasn't drowning. I was swimming. There's a difference. And if I had taken that money, I would have started truly sinking, because I would have lost the one thing no one can take from me. And what would that be? My dignity. The certainty that I deserve what I earn. Maria took a deep breath, controlling her voice. You have so much money that you've forgotten there are things it can't buy. I might be poor, but I know who I am. Do you? Robert's smile vanished. He stood up slowly, and Maria noticed he was tall, much taller than her, but she didn't back down. You know nothing about me. I know you're sad. Maria didn't know where those words came from, but they flowed like spring water. I know you use money as protection, like a wall. I bet it's been a long time since anyone got truly close, because you test everyone first, and I bet everyone fails, because you've created impossible tests to pass. Robert opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came out. Maria continued, her voice softer now, almost gentle. And you know what's saddest? That you tested me hoping I would fail, because if I failed, it would confirm that you're right not to trust anyone. But I passed, and now you don't know what to do with me. She picked up her purse and walked toward the elevator. Robert stood still, the glass of whiskey forgotten in his hand. Maria. She stopped, but didn't turn around. Let me reward you. You were honest. You deserve something for that. Maria looked back, and there was something in her eyes that made Robert's stomach churn uncomfortably. I don't want anything from you. I didn't return your wallet to get a reward. I returned it because it was my obligation, because that's how decent people act. Good night, Mr. Alden. The elevator doors closed, and Robert was left alone in the silent apartment, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Shame. 3 days later, Maria arrived home after another double shift and found an envelope under the door. Inside, a payment receipt. Someone had paid off her overdue rent, her college tuition, and deposited another $500 into her account. She didn't need to ask who it was. Maria picked up her phone with trembling fingers and dialed the number that was still saved. What did you do? Robert was in his office, looking out at the nighttime view of the city through the windows of the 23rd floor. I solved your problems. Consider it a thank you. I didn't ask for this. Her voice was heavy with contained emotion. I don't want this. Why not? It's just money, Maria. It doesn't change who you are. Yes, it does. Maria sat down on the old sofa in the small living room, holding the receipt. Because now I didn't earn this. Someone simply decided I need charity and invaded my life without permission. You bought me. I didn't. You bought me. Maria interrupted. The same way you left the wallet to test me, now you're paying my bills to feel good about yourself, to prove you're generous. But it's not generosity when you take away a person's right to choose. It's control. Robert was silent. She was right. Again. So, what do you want me to do? I want you to stop using me to feel better. I want you to respect me enough to understand that I don't need to be saved. I need opportunity, not a handout. And what's the difference? Maria looked at the receipt in her hands. Tears were streaming down her face, but her voice was firm. A handout is you deciding what I need and giving it to me without asking. Opportunity is you asking me how you can truly help, and accepting it if I say I don't need anything. It's you showing up as a human being, not as a walking ATM. Robert hung up the phone and stared at the black screen for a long time. Then, he did something he hadn't done in years. He cried. Not dramatic tears. Just a silent, wet trail that slipped down his cheek as he saw himself reflected in the window glass. A 48-year-old man surrounded by luxury, completely alone because he had turned every human relationship into a commercial transaction. Maria had just done something no one had managed in decades. She had broken the wall he had built, brick by brick, around his heart, and he didn't know whether he wanted to thank her or hate her for it. The next morning, Maria woke up to a message on her phone. Unknown number. You are right. I apologize for the intrusion. I will cancel the payments if you wish. But there is one thing I would like to ask, if you will allow me. Maria read the message 3 times before replying. What? That you teach me. The answer came immediately. Teach you what? How to be human again? Maria looked at the message for a long time. Part of her wanted to block the number and never think about that strange, disturbing man again. But another part, the part that had studied pedagogy because she believed everyone deserved a second chance to learn, hesitated. Finally, she typed, tomorrow, 10 o'clock, Central Park. Gate 2. Come alone. And bring comfortable shoes. Robert read the message and smiled. For the first time in years, it was a genuine smile. Robert arrived at Central Park 15 minutes early, a rarity for someone accustomed to making everyone wait. He wore a navy blue polo shirt and jeans, clothes that probably cost more than Maria's entire wardrobe, but at least they didn't scream wealth like his Italian suits. She appeared exactly at 10, wearing a faded college t-shirt and simple shorts. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she carried a backpack. Good morning, Maria said without smiling, but also without hostility. Ready to walk? That's it? Just walk? That's it. She started walking along the gravel path, and Robert followed, adjusting his pace to hers. When was the last time you walked here just because? No meeting, no business objective, no networking, Robert thought. Honestly, he couldn't remember. Must be 20 years. Maria nodded as if she had expected that answer. They walked in silence for a few minutes, passing families, picnicking, young people skateboarding, elderly people feeding ducks in the pond. Ordinary, simple life, happening without haste. Why did you want me to come here? Robert finally asked. Because here, no one cares how much money you have. Maria pointed to a group of children playing tag. There, everyone is equal, and you need to remember what that's like. To be equal? To be human. Maria stopped near a leafy tree and sat down on the grass. Robert hesitated before sitting beside her, clearly uncomfortable with the informality. You said you wanted me to teach you, so this is the first lesson. You are not special. Robert let out a surprised laugh. That's reverse motivational. It's not about motivation. It's about truth. Maria plucked a blade of grass and twirled it between her fingers. You built your entire identity on being different, better, more successful. But that's just social function. Beneath all that, you get hungry, you get tired, you feel fear, just like everyone else. The difference is that you forgot that. And you think reminding me of that will change anything? Maria looked him straight in the eye. I think it will take some of the weight off your shoulders. It must be exhausting to pretend to be invincible all the time. Robert opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. It was exhausting. Terribly exhausting. They stayed there for an hour, sometimes talking, sometimes in silence. Maria told him about her mother, Mrs. Celia, who had been a seamstress her whole life and now could barely breathe properly on humid days. She told him about her father, who had taught her to read using old newspapers, and who always said that education was the only inheritance no one could steal. Robert, for the first time, talked about the wife who had left him 5 years ago, saying it was easier to love a concrete wall. About the son who lived in London and only called when he needed something. About the loneliness that hid behind every professional achievement. When Maria checked her watch, it was almost noon. "I have to go. Shift starts at 2. Robert stood up, brushing the grass off his pants. "Can I give you a ride?" "I prefer to take the bus." "Why?" Maria adjusted the backpack on her shoulders. "Because I need you to understand that we're not doing this for you, to help me financially. If we're going to have any kind of friendship, and I'm not even sure yet if that's what I want, it has to be between equals." "But we're not equals, Maria." Robert gestured between them. "I have resources that can make your life easier. Why is it wrong to use that?" "Because making my life easier isn't your job. It's mine." Maria took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Look, I understand you want to help, and maybe in the future I'll accept some specific help, but right now, at this moment, I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing, that I am capable. Because if you keep trying to solve my problems, you're saying, even unintentionally, that you don't believe I can do it alone. That's not what I know it's not your intention, but it's the effect, and effect matters more than intention." Robert stood still, processing. Then he nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm sorry." Maria smiled for the first time that morning, and it was as if the sun had suddenly gotten brighter. "Want to come again Saturday, same time?" "I do." They said goodbye at the gate, and Robert watched her disappear around the corner before returning to where he had parked his car. Inside the silent, air-conditioned vehicle, he found himself smiling for no apparent reason. Saturdays at the park became routine. 3 weeks later, Maria knew more about Robert than most people who had worked with him for years. She knew he had a fear of hospitals since his father died in one when he was 12. She knew he played classical piano well, but no longer played because he associated music with his ex-wife. She knew he slept poorly and compensated with too much coffee. Robert, in turn, was learning. He learned that Maria woke up at 5 in the morning to study before work, that she gave free tutoring to neighborhood children on Sundays, that her biggest dream was to open a community school where quality education wasn't a privilege for the few. And he learned, slowly, painfully, that not everything was solved with money. It was in the 4th week that everything changed. Maria didn't show up at the park. Robert waited 40 minutes before calling. She didn't answer. He texted. Nothing. A strange and inconvenient worry settled in his chest. He tried to distract himself with work, but at 6 in the evening he gave in and did something he knew Maria would disapprove of. He used his contacts to find her address. 40 minutes later, he was at the door of an old 2-story house in the outskirts of South LA. The paint was peeling off the walls, and the iron gate was rusty. Robert rang the doorbell. Maria opened the door with red, swollen eyes. She was in pajamas in the middle of the afternoon. "What are you doing here? You didn't show up. You didn't answer. I got worried." She was about to reply when a fit of coughing echoed from inside the house. A hoarse, heavy cough that made Robert shiver. "Your mother?" Maria nodded, tears returning to her eyes. "She got much worse. I tried to take her to the community clinic, but the line was huge and she couldn't handle staying there. I brought her back home." "Did you call an ambulance?" Maria laughed, but it was a humorless sound. "Ambulances take hours if they come, and a public hospital the way she is will mean a long wait. I can't afford private hospitalization." Robert didn't think. He simply acted. "I have a contact, a pulmonologist, one of the best in the city. He owes me a favor. I can have him come here now to examine your mother." Maria stared at him, the conflict evident on her face. Pride versus necessity. Independence versus the health of the person she loved most in the world. "Please," Robert said, and there was something in his voice Maria had never heard before. Supplication. "Not as a favor to you, as a privilege for me. Let me do this." Maria closed her eyes. When she opened them, there was acceptance but also something more. Okay, but with one condition. What? You don't pay. You arrange the consultation, but I will find a way to pay later, even if it's in installments, even if it takes years. Maria, that's the condition. It's that or nothing. Robert looked at that stubborn, proud young woman in old pajamas and determined eyes and felt something shift inside him, something fundamental and irreversible. Okay, you pay. He took out his phone and made the call. 30 minutes later, Dr. Henry Tavares was in Mrs. Celia's simple living room, examining the 62-year-old woman, with care and attention. The diagnosis came with a prescription for medication and specific instructions. Expensive, but not impossible. Maria thanked him with dignity, and the doctor left with a respectful nod. When they were alone on the front porch, Maria finally looked at Robert properly. Thank you for not arguing about the payment. You're welcome. Pause. Are you really going to be able to pay? I will, even if I have to take more shifts. Robert opened his mouth to offer help, but caught himself in time. Instead, he said something different. You are the strongest person I have ever met. Maria shook her head. I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn. Is that the same thing? She smiled. Sometimes. They stood there side by side, watching the sun set over the busy neighborhood, and something silent and important settled between them. 2 weeks passed since the doctor's visit. Mrs. Celia improved significantly with the proper medication, and Maria managed to negotiate the payment in 8 interest-free installments with the neighborhood pharmacy, where she had been known since childhood. Robert continued to show up at the park on Saturdays, but now sometimes stopped by Maria's house during the week. Always. Bringing something simple, a cake left over from a meeting, fruits that had been over-delivered to his apartment, transparent excuses that Maria accepted with a knowing smile. It was during one of these visits that Mrs. Celia finally managed to talk to him properly. Sitting in the rocking chair on the porch, a shawl over her shoulders despite the heat, she observed Robert with sharp eyes that strongly resembled her daughter's. So, you're the young man Maria saved, she said, without preamble. Robert, who was helping to arrange some plants in the backyard, stopped and looked at the elderly woman. I think it was the other way around, Mrs. Celia. I was the one who tried to help her. The woman let out a low laugh that ended in a slight cough. She controlled her breathing and continued. Young man, I'm old, but I'm not blind. You arrived here broken inside, and my daughter is mending you. That's saving, in the way that matters. Robert sat down on the porch step, his usual pride giving way to something closer to humility. She is special. That she is. Mrs. Celia rocked slowly in the chair. But be careful, you hear? My girl has too soft a heart. She believes everyone can change, improve. And sometimes they can. But sometimes the person doesn't really want to change. They just want someone to believe in them, without having to do the hard work. Do you think I'm like that? I don't know yet. Mrs. Celia looked him straight in the eye. That's why I'm warning you. If you're not willing to do the real work, to deconstruct and rebuild yourself, it's better to leave now. Because if you break her heart later, you'll have to answer to me. Despite the seriousness of the moment, Robert smiled. You are very direct. I don't have time to be any other way. Life is short, young man, and I need to know that when I'm no longer here, my daughter will have real people around her, not fake people who just want to use her. I don't want to use her, Mrs. Celia. Robert stopped, searching for the right words. I just want to learn how to be a better person, and she's the only one who has had the patience to teach me. Mrs. Celia studied him for a long moment, then nodded, satisfied. Then that's fine. But remember the warning. I will remember. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. Mrs. Celia's words echoed in his mind. Was he really changing? Or was he just playing the role of someone who changes because Maria expected it of him? At 3 a.m, he got up and went to the apartment office. He opened his laptop and started typing. Not an investment report or market analysis. Something different. A project. On Monday, he called an extraordinary meeting with the firm's partners. They gathered in the conference room on the 23rd floor, 5 men in suits and 1 woman in an impeccable blazer, all looking at Robert with curiosity. "I want to propose something different," Robert began, projecting a presentation onto the screen. "A scholarship fund for low-income youth. Not just financial scholarships, but a complete program of mentorship, academic support, and preparation for the job market." Fernando, the oldest partner, frowned. "That's charity, Robert. It's not our focus." "It's not charity. It's an investment in human capital." Robert was prepared for the objections. "In the long term, we are training qualified professionals who might even come back to work with us. Plus, there are considerable tax benefits." "And the budget? How much are you planning to allocate to this?" $2 million in the first year, from my own percentage of profits." The room fell silent. $2 million was a significant amount, even by their standards. "Have you lost your mind?" Patricia, the only female partner, leaned forward. "What's gotten into you?" Robert looked at each of them, these colleagues he had known for years, but who, he realized now, he barely knew at all. "I met someone who showed me that there is value beyond numbers on spreadsheets, and I want to do something that truly matters." "Is this because of a woman?" Fernando rolled his eyes. "Robert, seriously, you're mixing personal life with business." "No." Robert stood up, planting his hands on the table. "I'm finally stopping separating the two things as if they were incompatible. Life is personal, Fernando, and business is done by people. I forgot that. Now I'm remembering." The meeting ended without consensus. Robert knew some partners would support it, others wouldn't. But for the first time, it didn't bother him. He would make the project happen anyway, even if he had to fund it alone. He just didn't. "Tell Maria." "Not yet." On Friday, Maria was closing the diner when Robert appeared. She raised her eyebrows, surprised. "It's not Saturday." "I know." Robert looked agitated, excited in a way she had never seen. "But I need to show you something. Can you leave now?" "I still have to clean the—" "I'll clean it." Mr. Antonio appeared from the kitchen, already wearing his apron. "Go on, kid. The young man looks like he's going to explode if you don't go." Maria looked from one to the other, confused, but grabbed her purse. Robert guided her to the car, and she hesitated. "Where are we going?" "You'll see. Do you trust me?" Maria thought for a moment, then got into the car. She trusted him, she realized. Against all logic, against all her instinct for self-preservation, she trusted this man who had started as an antagonist in her life. They drove for 20 minutes until they reached a commercial building downtown. Robert parked and guided her to the 3rd floor, using a key to open a glass door. Inside was a large empty space, but with obvious potential. Large windows let in the city light. The floor was hardwood, old, but well-maintained. "What is this?" Maria asked, slowly turning to absorb everything. "It's yours." Robert leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets. "I mean, it can be, if you want it to be." "Robert, what are you talking about?" He took a deep breath. "You said your dream was to open a community school. So, here it is. The space. I rented it for a year, payment up front. But," he hurried to continue when he saw her expression, "the contract is blank. Your name, my name, the name of a non-profit organization. Whatever you want. And if you don't want it, I'll cancel it. And that's that." Maria stood still, processing. Then she started walking through the space, her fingers touching the walls, imagining. Tables there, a library over there, a reading nook near the windows. "Why did you do this?" "Because you made me remember that money only has value when it serves something greater." Robert followed her with his eyes. "And because, for the first time in a long time, I want to be part of something that truly matters. Not as a distant donor, but as someone involved. If you'll have me." Maria turned to him, tears in her eyes. She wanted to scream that he had crossed boundaries again. that he had made decisions for her. But looking at the space, feeling the possibilities, she realized something different. He hadn't created the school and handed it over ready-made. He had given her the choice, the power of decision. "I accept," she said finally, "but with conditions. There are always conditions." Robert smiled. "What are they?" "First, this becomes an independent, non-profit organization. Neither my name nor yours as owners. Second, you can't just dump money here. We build this together, with planning, a real budget, sustainability. Third," she took a deep breath, "you're going to have to show up. For real. Not just sign checks. Teach what you know, mentor students. Be present." Robert extended his hand. "I accept all terms." Maria shook his hand, and for the first time since they met, the touch wasn't one of suspicion or testing. It was partnership. They stood there, in the empty space that would soon be filled with life and learning, and both felt that something fundamental had changed, not just between them, but within them. Robert had found purpose. Maria had found partnership. And together, they were building something neither of them could do alone. Outside, the city continued its frantic pace. But inside, on the third floor of that old building, something new was being born. Something that was priceless, but had infinite value. Hope. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of planning, paperwork, and hard work. Maria reduced her hours at the diner to part-time, using the savings she had made to offset the difference in income. Robert, to the surprise of everyone in the office, started leaving at 5 in the afternoon twice a week to meet with Maria and discuss the project. The dynamic between them evolved into something complex and multifaceted. Sometimes they were teacher and student, with Maria teaching Robert about pedagogy and him teaching her about financial management and organizational structure. Other times they were business partners, debating intensely over every decision. And in rare and precious moments, they were simply friends, laughing at inside jokes and sharing reheated coffee in disposable cups. But not everything was harmony. The first major fight happened when Robert, in a fit of efficiency, hired a renovation company without consulting Maria. She arrived at the space and found 3 men measuring walls and discussing the layout. "What is going on here?" Maria dropped her backpack on the floor with a dull thud. Robert, who was reviewing a quote, looked up, confused by her tone. "I'm speeding up the renovation. If we start today, we can inaugurate in 6 weeks instead of 3 months. And who authorized this?" "I authorized it. It's my money funding it, so nothing." Maria cut him off, her voice dangerously low. "We agreed that decisions would be made together. That includes when and how to spend." "Maria, be reasonable. It's just a matter of efficiency." "It's not about efficiency, Robert. It's about respect." She walked closer to him, her eyes blazing with contained anger. "Every time you do this, you're saying my opinion doesn't matter. That in the end, the one with the money is the one who calls the shots. That's not what I—" "It's exactly what it is." Maria picked up her purse. "Either we do this the right way, as real partners, or I walk out now and you can run your charity school alone." She slammed the door shut as she left. Robert stood still, the quote forgotten in his hand, feeling as if he had been punched in the gut. The workers looked at him with evident discomfort. Robert dismissed everyone with a weary gesture and sat down on the dusty floor, his head in his hands. He had done it again. He had used money as a shortcut, as a solution, as control. Exactly what Maria had asked him not to do. 2 hours later, he was at her front door. Maria answered with her arms crossed, her face closed off. "Can I come in?" "Depends. Did you come to genuinely apologize or to convince me you were right?" Robert swallowed his pride, that old companion that had dictated his actions for decades. "I came to genuinely apologize, and to cancel the contract with the renovation company." Maria blinked, surprised. "You canceled it?" "I'll cancel it now in front of you if you want." Robert took his phone out of his pocket. "Because you're right. I promised partnership, but I acted like the boss, and that's not fair to you." Marina opened the door completely. "Come in." They sat in the small living room. Mrs. Celia was sleeping in the bedroom, so they spoke in hushed tones. "Why is it so hard for you to let go of control?" Marina asked, not accusingly, just with genuine curiosity. Robert was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "Because control is security. When I was 12, my dad lost his job. We had no savings, we had no plan. Within 6 months, we were on the street. My mom had to work 3 jobs. My dad, he just fell apart. He simply gave up. And I, as a kid, couldn't do anything. I could only watch everything collapse." Marina lightly touched his arm. A silent gesture of understanding. "I swore I would never be that vulnerable again. That I would never again let things be outside of my control. So I built this life where I make all the decisions, where I have all the answers, where nothing can surprise me." Robert looked at her, his eyes moist. "And then you showed up and messed everything up. Because with you, I can't control things, and that terrifies me." Marina absorbed that. Then she said gently, "Control isn't security, Robert. It's an illusion. You can have all the money in the world and still have things happen that are beyond your reach. The difference is, when you try to control everything alone, you really are alone. But when you trust other people, when you share the burden, that's when you have real security. Because you're not by yourself. What if people let me down? Some will." Marina shrugged. "I'm sure I've let you down already, but that doesn't mean it's not worth trying. It means we are all human, imperfect, and that's okay." Robert laughed, a wet, almost tearful sound. "How did you get so wise?" "I didn't. I just learned to accept that I don't know everything, and that it's okay not to know." They sat there side by side on the old couch, and Robert felt something release inside him, a tension he had carried for so long he had forgotten it was there. "I want to do this right," he finally said. "I genuinely want to be your partner, not your financier. But you're going to have to be patient with me, because this is new territory for me. I have patience." Marina smiled. "I'm a teacher, remember? Patience is practically my superpower." In the following days, they restarted the renovation, planning, this time truly together. Every decision was discussed, debated, sometimes fought over, but always decided jointly. It was slower, more laborious, but also richer, more comprehensive. Robert discovered that Marina had an exceptional eye for educational space design, thinking about things he would never consider. Shelf height for different ages, natural lighting to reduce eye strain, colors that stimulate concentration without overwhelming. Marina discovered that Robert had an impressive ability to solve complex logistical problems, finding reliable suppliers, negotiating fair prices, and creating organizational systems that made everything run more smoothly. Together, they were stronger than the sum of their parts. It was in the 5th week of work that the news arrived. Mrs. Celia had taken a turn for the worse again. This time, it wasn't something a home remedy or an outpatient visit would fix. It required hospitalization. It was serious. Marina called Robert at 2 a.m, her voice ragged with tears and panic. He didn't ask any questions, he just said, "I'm on my way." 40 minutes later, he was at the public hospital with her. The corridor was packed, people sitting on the floor waiting for care. The smell of disinfectant couldn't mask other, less pleasant odors. Marina was sitting on a plastic chair, hugging herself. Robert sat down beside her. "How is she?" "Stable, for now. But the doctor said she needs prolonged hospitalization, constant observation." Marina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know how I'm going to pay for this, Robert. The public hospital system is doing what it can, but there's a waiting list for the respiratory ward. It could take days." "And she doesn't have days." Robert opened his mouth, the obvious solution already forming on his tongue. He knew private hospitals. He could have Mrs. Celia transferred in an hour, VIP treatment, a private room. But then he remembered. He remembered all their conversations, all the lessons. He remembered that Marina didn't want to be saved. She wanted to be supported. So, instead of offering money, he offered presence. "I'll stay here with you, for as long as it takes, and we'll figure this out together, the way you want to figure it out." Marina looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." And he stayed. All night in the uncomfortable hospital corridor, sometimes talking quietly with Marina, sometimes just holding her hand in silence. When she finally fell asleep, her head resting on his shoulder, Robert remained motionless so as not to wake her, even when his arm started to tingle. In the early morning, when Marina woke up startled from a nightmare, he soothed her with soft words until she drifted back to sleep. And when the sun rose, bringing better news, a bed had opened up and Mrs. Celia would be admitted in the next few hours, he celebrated with her as if the victory were his own. Because it was. Because they were partners now. Truly. And Robert realized, sitting in that hospital corridor, tired and sore, that he was genuinely happy. Not because of the achievement of some financial or professional goal, but because he was being useful in a way that mattered. Because he was present. Because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. Marina looked at him in the soft morning light and saw not the arrogant investor from table 14, but a real man, imperfect, learning, trying, and her heart filled with something she wasn't ready to name yet. Gratitude, perhaps. Or something deeper. Something like true friendship. Or maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something more. Mrs. Celia was hospitalized for 12 days. They were 12 days of uncertainty, waiting, small victories, and temporary setbacks. Marina practically lived at the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs and eating vending machine sandwiches. Robert showed up every day after work, sometimes bringing real food, sometimes just bringing company. It was on the 7th day of hospitalization that Mrs. Celia, finally lucid and breathing more easily, called Robert for a private conversation. Marina had gone home to shower, so they were alone in the shared room of the ward. "Sit here, young man," Mrs. Celia indicated the chair beside the bed. "I need to talk to you about something." Robert sat down, a little apprehensive. "Of course, Mrs. Celia. What is it?" She was silent for a moment, gathering her strength. When she spoke, her voice was weak but firm. "I know you like my daughter." Robert felt his face flush. "Mrs. Celia, no need to deny it, I'm old, not blind. The way you look at her, the way you show up every day, even after working all day, the way you worry." She shook, her head slowly. "I see it." Robert took a deep breath. He hadn't realized it was so obvious. "It is to me. Maybe not to her yet. My Marina is smart about everything except matters of the heart." Mrs. Celia coughed lightly, accepting the glass of water Robert offered. "But I need you to understand one thing. My daughter is not the kind of woman who can be bought. She never was, and she never will be. I know that. I would never—" "Let me finish." Her voice was gentle but insistent. "If you want to be part of her life, it has to be on her terms. No shortcuts. No using your money to smooth things over. She needs to earn everything herself to feel like she deserves it. Do you understand that?" "I understand now." Robert looked at his hands. "She taught me." "Good." Mrs. Celia smiled tiredly. "Because I won't be here forever to look after her. And I need to know that when I go, she will have someone who truly understands her. You're going to be here for a long time yet. I hope so. But if not, I want to die knowing I didn't." "Leave her alone." Robert felt a lump in his throat. "She won't be alone. I promise." Mrs. Celia held his hand with surprising strength for someone so frail. "Then promise me one more thing. Promise that when you tell her how you feel, it will be because you have become a man who deserves her. Not the man you were when you walked into that restaurant, but the man you are becoming. I promise." When Marina returned, she found the two of them discussing cake recipes. as if they hadn't just had one of the most important conversations of Robert's life. Mrs. Celia was discharged on the 12th day. The return home was a small, intimate celebration. Her, Marina, Robert, and Mr. Anthony, who had closed the restaurant early to help tidy up the house. That night, with Mrs. Celia finally sleeping comfortably in her own bed, Marina and Robert sat on the porch. "Thank you," Marina said suddenly, "for everything, for staying, for not trying to solve everything with money, for just being present. It was the easiest thing I've ever done." Robert looked at her in the soft light of the street lamp, and the most important. They sat, in silence for a moment, comfortable and complete. "The school opens next week," Marina commented. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified?" Robert laughed. "Me? Mentoring teenagers? Who would have thought?" "You'll do great." Marina nudged him with her shoulder. "I've seen you with some of the students in the planning meetings. You have a knack for it. I didn't before. You taught me." Marina shook her head. "I didn't teach you anything you didn't already know deep down. I just reminded you." 3 months later, the Paul Miller Educational Center was fully operational. The name had been Robert's idea, a tribute to Marina's father, and she had cried when he suggested it. 45 students attended the tutoring sessions, reading workshops and mentorship programs. Robert, to his own surprise, found that he loved teaching financial literacy to teenagers, translating complex concepts into accessible language. Marina was radiant. She saw her dream coming to life, saw young people who might have given up finding hope and opportunity. And she saw Robert, transformed from a bitter, solitary man into someone engaged, present, genuinely happy. The official inauguration was on a sunny Saturday. Mrs. Celia was there, still frail but smiling, seated in a chair of honor. Mr. Anthony brought snacks from the restaurant. Neighbors and students' families packed the space. Marina gave an emotional speech about education as a tool for transformation. Robert spoke briefly about second chances and community. But the most striking moment was when one of the students, a 15-year-old boy named Lucas, took the microphone. "Before this place, I was going to drop out of school," he said, his voice trembling with nervousness. "I thought I had no future anyway, but Professor Marina showed me I could be more, and Professor Robert taught me that money doesn't define us. Character does." The audience applauded. Marina and Robert looked at each other over the heads of the crowd, and something passed between them. A silent, profound understanding. After everyone had left and the space was cleaned up, they stood there alone. Marina was by the window looking at the quiet street below. Robert approached slowly. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked. "How could I forget? You tested me." Marina turned to him, but she was smiling. "I still regret not throwing that wallet in your face. I deserved it." Robert chuckled. "I was an idiot. You were." Marina agreed, easily. "And now?" "Now?" Robert hesitated, then decided to be brave. "Now I'm a lovesick idiot." The silence that followed was absolute. Marina blinked, processing the words. "What?" "I fell in love with you, Marina." Robert spoke quickly before he lost his nerve. "I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe when you gave me back the wallet and looked at me like I was the most pathetic person you'd ever seen. Maybe when you taught me to sit on the grass and be normal. Maybe at the hospital when you slept on my shoulder. But it happened. And I needed to tell you." Marina stood still, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. 1,000 thoughts raced through her head. All the reasons why this was a bad idea. All the risks. All the ways this could go wrong. And then she thought of everything Robert had become. Not the rich, arrogant man from table 14, but the man who had stayed in the hospital all night, who had canceled contracts to respect her opinion, who had learned to be present without trying to control everything, the man who had done the hard work of transforming himself. "Robert, she began, and saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of rejection, fear of having ruined everything. "I don't know if this is a good idea." "I understand." Robert took a step back. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Let me finish. Marina moved closer to him. I don't know if it's a good idea because this changes everything between us. And I like what we have. I like what we've built. I'm afraid of messing it up. What if it doesn't mess it up? What if it makes it better? Marina looked at this man who had entered her life as a test and had become the most important person in it. And she realized that the fear she felt wasn't of Robert. It was of herself, of allowing herself to want something beyond survival, of believing she deserved to be happy. You promised me something once, she said slowly. You promised you would only be part of my life if it was as an equal, as a person, not as a savior. And I kept that promise. Robert gently held her face. I don't want to save you, Marina. I want to walk beside you, as a partner, as a friend, and if you let me, as something more. Marina closed her eyes, feeling his hands, warm and firm, against her skin. When she opened them, there was clarity. I fell in love with you too. I think since the day you sat on the park grass and admitted you didn't know how to be normal. She smiled. You were so lost and so willing to learn. And you taught me everything. How to be a real human, how to be present, how to value what is priceless. We taught each other, Marina corrected. You taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, that true partnership requires vulnerability on both sides. Robert smiled, that genuine smile that had replaced the cynical smirk of months ago. So are we saying that? That we're in love? And that we're going to try? Slowly, carefully, without rushing. But we're going to try. And he kissed her. Soft, respectful, full of promise. And Marina kissed him back, allowing herself finally to believe she deserved it. That she deserved to be loved. Not despite her struggle, but including all of it. When they separated, they were smiling like teenagers. 6 months later, the Paul Miller Educational Center had a waiting list. Robert had reduced his workload at the investment firm to dedicate more time to the project. Marina had graduated with honors in pedagogy and taken on the official educational directorship of the center. Mrs. Celia, though still frail, was stable and a constant presence in the activities, telling stories to the children and teaching embroidery to the girls. And Robert and Marina? They kept learning, with each other, from each other. Sometimes they argued because they were strong people with their own opinions, but they always reconciled because they had learned that vulnerability is not weakness. One night, lying on the couch in the apartment they now shared, half the time at her place, half at his, Marina asked a question. Do you still believe everyone has a price? Robert thought, truly thought, before answering. No, I believe everyone has value, and the greatest value cannot be bought or sold. It can only be recognized, respected, and honored. Marina smiled and nestled closer to him. You learned well. I had a good teacher. And they lay there, two survivors from different worlds who met halfway and decided to build something new, together. Not a fairy tale where the rich prince saves the poor commoner, but a real story where two people saved each other by choosing to show up, truly, without masks or defenses. Because in the end, they both realized the only thing money can't buy is the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to love without guarantees. And that was the most valuable lesson of all. End of story. If Marina and Robert's journey touched your heart, if you believe everyone deserves a second chance to become their best self, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories, celebrating human transformation, the power of dignity, and true connection. Tell us in the comments, have you ever had to choose between the easy path and the right path? Which one did you choose? Let's keep this conversation going together, because every story of change starts with a choice, and yours can start right now.